there's going to be at least 5 teams that are going to be offering me at least $20 million a year because I'm a premium starter that never gets hurt. Why would I stay in Seattle?
Exactly. The Mariners managed to find a way to still gather attention amongst themselves with a couple things. We've got Jorge Polanco was possibly injured throughout the entire season and played through it. And Logan Gilbert, possible extension talks or no extension talks. What actually went down? You will find out after a word from our sponsor, SeatGeek.
SeatGeek is a mobile ticketing app for sporting events, concerts, and other events. They make the buying experience easier by the app ranking each ticket from 0 to 10 to see if you are getting a good deal, and you can see exactly where you are sitting. I regularly use that app, and I have had nothing but a fantastic experience with SeatGeek. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get $20 off of your first purchase. Link to the code, app, and website will be in the description, so take advantage, and thank you.
And yep, if you are watching, if you're planning to go to a playoff game, if you're a Dodgers fan, Yankees fan, Guardians fan, or whatever, use that promo code RoofTopSports to save $20. At least get $20 worth of food for your worth to watch those games. But here we go. So the first thing we shall touch on is Jorge Polanco. So it turns out, according to, I think it looks like it was according to Jeff Passan, he reported that Jorge Polanco had just underwent surgery to repair the pellar tendon in his left knee, but is expected to be ready for beginning of spring training. So it turns out that he was struggling with knee pain, at least for recent years, and it grew more problematic throughout the 2024 season as he really tried to play through it. And his offensive numbers, I guess now it makes sense that his offensive numbers weren't great. And let's take a look and see what his offensive numbers were.
They were terrible. I think he hit 213. I think he had a sub-3 OBP. He had an OBP of 296. He only slugged 355 with an OPS of 651, OPS plus of 93. By far, 16 home runs, 45 RBIs. By far, it was his lowest.
It was his worst season of his career. It was bar none, because his OBP is expected at worst case scenario to be maybe a 313, as that was his lowest in previous years. And it went all the way down to 296. Now, question remains, does a healthy Jorge Polanco, would that have made a difference? Would it have been any better if he was actually healthy?
Yes, 100%. Now, I know Mariner fans are going to kind of scoff at that notion, but that being said, you probably never played a professional sport in your life, or never played a sport at all, right? When your profession requires lateral movement or speed or any type of first step, as Jorge Polanco is or required to, or even in a position where you're trying to swing a baseball bat where you have to load and unload and use your front foot, to step and guide and bring your hips through the contact zone. It makes it incredibly difficult to perform, period. And Jorge Polanco apparently was injured throughout the entire course of the season. And, the Seattle Mariners were in a position where they were desperate. It's unfortunate. They were desperate. And Jorge Polanco was 75% and felt good enough to get out there to perform, and it just wasn't good enough. So a lot of that responsibility is on the Seattle Mariners for doing that. And I don't know what those conversations were. But it's also on Jorge Polanco as well too. He felt like he was good enough to go out there, but obviously it wasn't good enough. So I think there's mutual responsibility in both. I'm happy that Jorge Polanco is getting his patella tendon fixed. Now the question is, how long is it going to take for him to recover? How long is it going to take for him to rehab? They say that he's going to be ready for spring. We'll see. We're what now? 90 some odd days from spring training. So we'll see. The question is it's not, is Jorge Polanco going to be back? The question is should he be back with this Mariners team? And do you have confidence that a fully repaired Jorge Polanco is going to help this team win?
So yeah, you had excellent points. And must I say this is, it really seems to be that this whole thing with Jorge Polanco was mishandled on both sides, like you said. I think what the Mariners should have done was they should have gave Ryan Bliss more opportunities, because at least when he was playing, he was contributing at least decent. Now his numbers doesn't really show it, as they're pretty much almost the same as Jorge Polanco. But for a young prospect that he is, and the fact that the Mariners gave up Paul Sewald to get him, I think he should have been allowed a little bit more playing time. So not only he can showcase of what he can do and for next season, but also give Jorge Polanco some proper time to recover from that injury that he was dealing with. And now going into next year, he has that team option. And now it's very unclear if the Mariners are going to accept the team option. And going into that free agent market doesn't really stick out that much, with the exception of Gleyber Torres and Brandon Lowe. Both of them have a 5.1 or above wins above replacement. Brandon Lowe has that club option, so it remains to be seen whether they're going to pick up that option. But Gleyber Torres will be a free agent going into the next season. So a lot of decisions to be made. And the other concerns I have about Jorge Polanco going into next season is, can his health actually even hold up even with surgery? And will he be able to perform with another year being older? So a lot of question marks on that. And it's going to be a lot of thinking about for the Mariners on whether they can find a replacement, whether they can trust Ryan Bliss, or if they're ready to call up Cole Young, or if they're just going to go on another year of Jorge Polanco, but with that contract of his, which I also got to check, and I believe it's not cheap. I'll say that.
I think it's something at 15 maybe. But the thing you have to understand here is, number one, Polanco has zero leverage here, right? His agent can't be like, well, I'm going to shop him if you don't pick up the option, right? And it's like, well, you're not going to get those type of numbers regardless anywhere in the open market. As a matter of fact, the best you're going to get is a 1-year prove it deal, right? So it depends. Do you want to do that in Seattle, or do you want to do that elsewhere? And you can look at guys like Teoscar Hernandez, who did it with the Dodgers this year, did that little 1-year prove it deal. But regardless, he's got zero leverage. So I would probably assume that the Mariners, if they want to bring him back, it's going to be on their terms, which means they're probably going to turn down the option, but sign him on a 1-year deal that is very, very, very team friendly. That would probably be my guess, because they're not just going to pay him for the sake of paying him, right? So there's that. As far as Bliss goes, I will say this. Here's if it was known that he had this knee injury early in the season, we're talking like April, May, I would have preferred him getting the surgery in season. And if that means that Ryan Bliss is gonna play that position for 3 months, whatever the case may be, whatever. I think I tend to agree with you. When Ryan Bliss was playing, he added a little different dimension to the lineup, right? Speed. His defense was fine. There were moments where his bat was fine, but for a rookie, it wasn't terrible. At the very least, all you're doing is showcasing a guy like Ryan Bliss for potential move elsewhere. And then Polanco gets the surgery, rehabs, and he's back by July, August. But he comes back relatively better, somewhere closer to 100%. But that didn't happen. He tried to play through it, and I'm not a fan of that, right? Like if you have something that requires surgery, just get the surgery. At the very least, you're going to come back 2025 100%. But you brought up a very interesting question, right? So it's like, what is 2025 going to mean, even with a surgically repaired Jorge Polanco? Is that top ceiling better than what we saw in 2024? That's a very good question, right? I don't know. And that's the thing. Do you want to continue the second base carousel? That's the question that Jerry Dipoto has to ask himself, right? But that being said, if you want to bring back Jorge Polanco, it's going to be on your terms. So that's going to be the question that Jorge Polanco is going to have to ask himself, because you're not going to get what I think his number is somewhere close to $15 million if the Mariners
12 million.
12 million. There it is. So they're going to have to, like, the Mariners are not going to give him the 12 million for the sake of giving him 12 million. They're going to turn it down, and they're going to try to negotiate a number that's a little bit more reasonable, because they have other guys on their lineup, other guys in their lineup or on their roster that are making money that did not do a damn thing this year. And I'm looking at Mitch Haniger, guys that are probably going to opt in to this year, who are complete albatrosses, who the Mariners have to get rid of to be in with anyways, right? So they're not going to pay him 12 million. They're going to turn it down and try to negotiate a 1-year deal that's a lot more suitable for them. That's the biggest problem with Jorge Polanco. It's he didn't do himself any justice by trying to play through it. Like, I give him props for trying to play through an injury. I do. Like, that takes a huge set of balls to try to do that. But that being said, you didn't help matters at all. As a matter of fact, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why they ended up firing Scott Service. One of the myriad of reasons why they ended up firing him, because he couldn't play through it.
Yeah, we can all agree that it was mishandled. And fun stat that I just happened to look up, since Scott Service was all about the analytics, and he should really, when he was a manager, there was this website he really should have checked out. It's called baseballreference.com. For someone that believes in analytics, I doubt that he even still looked at this website, but
no.
Now I'm not saying that these are all direct reasons of these results. It would be ignorant of me to say, well, if the Mariners played Ryan Bliss throughout the season, they would have made play. That doesn't work that way. But here's a stat just to poke fun at it. When Ryan Bliss was playing for the Mariners were actually 20-13. And when Jorge Polanco played, he was 54-64. Now, again, are those the direct reasons why there was such a differential? Of course not. But sometimes it makes you wonder, would there have been any differences if Ryan Bliss played? Now, I'm not saying that if you put in Ryan Bliss, yeah, they're going to go like well above 500. No, probably not. But at least maybe there could have been some nitpicking situations where Ryan Bliss could have been more useful than Jorge Polanco. And sadly, I looked at Ryan Bliss's final game. He played against the Mets. He hit a home run and 2 RBIs. Yeah, he went 1 for 4, but he did come up with those runs. And I think he had something to add on to that.
Well, I'll say this. Ryan Bliss doesn't hit for Julio Rodriguez or Mitch Garver or Mitch Haniger or some of these other guys in the lineup that were in that lineup for a reason, which was to keep the engine running throughout the season. Ryan Bliss isn't a back end of the bullpen arm. You know what I mean? That completely fell apart at the end of the season, right? So there was a myriad of reasons why this team failed. A lot of it had to do with injury. Julio went out for a minute. JP went out for a minute. We lost Matt Brash for the entire season. We didn't have Gregory Santos essentially at every point of the season. We never had a healthy Gregory Santos. So, there was a lot of reasons that this team failed. Here's the thing. I'm not the biggest Ryan Bliss guy. I don't think he's an everyday player at the major league level, just like I don't think Josh Rojas is an everyday player at the major league level. And we already know that Dom Canzone can't handle it, which is why he's back in Tacoma, right? That trade was a complete and utter failure. Just like the Suarez deal, which is a complete and utter failure. At the end of the day, would I had preferred Ryan Bliss to play more 100%, because there was even just from the eye test, you can tell that Polanco was not right. There was just like you look at him swing, and it was like there was something visibly wrong with his swing when you compared it to the past 3 years when he was in a Minnesota Twins uniform, and the even swing, the fluid swing, the mental approach, just from looking at his swing, something was visibly wrong last year compared to the years before. And it's like there was, even when he came back, it didn't look good. It looked like he was struggling, and it looked like he just couldn't figure it out. And when you looked at his swings from years gone by, it's like, dude, he feasted on fastballs. Like you couldn't make a mistake with Jorge Polanco because he would make you pay for it. And this year, he just couldn't catch up to it. And it's like, okay, well, is he over the hill? I mean, he's only 30, so the reality is, like, he's still in his prime. And it's not like Mitch Haniger and he's 33 and he's just a broken down version of like years gone by. It's not that. There was something visibly wrong. So, I give him props for trying to play through it, but you ended up hurting the team a lot more than you were helping. And then that's where it becomes on the Mariners to shut you down for the rest of the season, or to say, hey, listen, it's May. We still have time in this season. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the surgery now in hopes of you're going to be back at the end of July or mid-August, and then you're going to help us for the stretch drive. And then we're just going to rely on Ryan Bliss until the trading deadline. Maybe we can bring in the second baseman at the deadline, to help cover until you're fully ready to come back. That would have been my approach. Because, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, when did he hurt himself? Was it in spring training? Was it in April?
I can't even remember at this point.
Yeah, to me, that's a sign of a desperate franchise that is willing to field a guy with an injury that required surgery.
I'm actually looking it up. Polanco was injured throughout the time of May 26th through June 24th, and then they still forced him through. And here's the thing, like, I think most fans, if the Mariners did exactly what you would have suggested, I think most fans, actually, I think all fans would have been more than okay with that, because he was clearly showing signs that he was just not playing up to his level.
Yeah.
And people were excited about Ryan Bliss. I was excited. Now, that I think he was going to be the all-star? Of course not, but at least he was a good spark plug. And it seemed that he was getting the other players fired up too.
Yeah, he's a guy who's willing to put down a buck. You know what I mean? A guy who is willing to do the little things that other people in the lineup are not willing to do, right? That was another issue with the 2024 Mariners, where there was only a handful of guys that were willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the team. Ryan Bliss was one of those guys, right? Where, he can give you a double if you really needed one. Didn't necessarily have the power, but that's fine. But when he got on base, he made defenses pay. That I love those type of players. But that being said, over the course of a 162 game season, can you rely on Bliss day in and day out? Well, we don't know yet because we haven't seen it, because the Mariners didn't. The Mariners were so desperate to get Polanco back in their lineup, they didn't really give him an opportunity to necessarily showcase that. I think at one stretch he only had like 2.5 weeks of regular playing time. It was a very short period of time where he was playing every day.
It was very inconsistent.
It was very inconsistent, right? So it wasn't what to you or I standards, where it's like, if you're going to bring up a dude playing, like you don't bring up a guy like Ryan Bliss and then make him your 26th man on the roster, and just sit him. It's one thing when you have Zevi Zavala on your roster and he's never going to play, but he's just there because you need a full roster, right? So he's essentially your 26th man who's never going to play. Like, that's the way, like, to me, that's the way, like, with Ryan Bliss, that's the way that I felt they were treating him. And it's like, as a prospect, I'd rather see him in AAA, because at least he's going to be playing every single day. And that's exactly what prospects need, everyday playing time. When he came up to the Mariners, it was only once a week, maybe twice a week he would play. And it's like, no. Like, if you're going to bring him up, you got to play him regardless. And I understand that you're in a playoff, you're like, you have playoff expectations. But that being said, you have a huge hole at second. You have a huge hole at second base. So play him. He's a second baseman. Right. And it's like, and they were trying to shoehorn, Dylan Moore into the, into the lineup. But it's like, he had that, Dylan had that one stretch in May where he was red hot, but outside of that, it was like Dylan's not, Dylan and Josh are not an everyday players. And it's like, you can when it was all said and done, when we reflect back on it, every decision that was made by Scott Servais, Jerry Dipoto, they just did not push the right buttons at all. And that's the sad thing about the 2024 Seattle Mariners. The only time that they pushed the right buttons was at the trading deadline, because I actually thought they had a very good deadline. They had actually one of the better deadlines in Major League Baseball. But outside of that, when it came to internal issues, they just did not push the right buttons, and it was to their detriment. It was 100% to their detriment. And Jorge Polanco was one of them, where as soon as they came back with the diagnosis where it was like surgery was required and they opted for rehab, they should have just shut him down and had him have surgery. Because at the very least, you're back in August. At the earliest, you're back in August. And if there's no setbacks in rehab, he's actually back on the field in August. And he gives you at least 2 full months of upper echelon baseball of what we saw of him in the last 2 seasons in Minnesota. And then we can actually have the conversation of, is it viable for Jorge to come back at the $12 billion with the option? Now it's like I wouldn't mind having him back. If he's going to be 100% next year, that's great, but it's got to be on a number that's going to be conducive for the Mariners, not Jorge Polanco. It's going to be it has to be like the Teoscar 1 year prove it deal type of scenario where they turn down the option, but say, okay, cool, man. Here's what we're going to do, man. We'll sign you to a 1 year deal, at $2 million base, but there's escalator clauses. So if you get to 25 home runs, then the deal goes to, $8 million or something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's performance based. So, there's incentives that, a contract structure like that, I wouldn't have a problem with if he's 100% healthy.
Well, we'll have to see what the Mariners are going to do with Jorge Polanco, which we'll probably find out after the World Series. Yeah.
How would you feel about that? Do you want him back? If it was on a 1 year base salary, which was $2.5 million, but it was escalator performance based, that went up to 10. You know what I mean? Would you be okay with that? Because it really is a prove me deal, right? And if he doesn't, if he has a season like this, 100% healthy, you can just DFA him at any point, because it's a very small base contract.
Well, knowing that the second base market isn't great, and I'm going to say this, if they don't end up getting the Gleyber Torres or even Brandon Lowe, which honestly, I don't even know if John Stanton even knows who those guys even are anyway, then yeah, sure. In those kind of terms, then yeah, that must be attractive. But definitely do not take that option. 100% do not take that option. I think that shouldn't be an option for the Mariners.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a deal out there for, I think the Mets have, what's his bucket? Why can't I think of his name right now? What's his name? Who was the Mets guy? I can't think of his name right now. Here we go. Jeff McNeil. Jeff McNeil. If you can swing a deal this offseason for a guy like Jeff McNeil, the real deal Jeff McNeil, where it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and you actually get a guy who's good defensively and he's got a stable stick. If you can swing a deal for a guy like that, yeah, I would be there's better options out there than Jorge Polanco. 100% there's better options. But that being said, if you're not going to go on the free agent market and actually spread some cash around, and you're unwilling to pay the premium of bringing in a guy like McNeil because you're afraid of giving up some prospects, then yeah, I guess Jorge Polanco is a good fallback option.
I mean, I'm going to say that I don't even think that second base is the biggest hole anyway. I think we can agree that
Yeah. Oh, no.
third base is the biggest hole. Shortstop actually should be considered a hole.
No. Like, it's third base for sure, but also first base is a massive hole.
Massive.
Your corner infield spots, two of your premium power spots in your lineup, third and first base, are wide open right now. And what makes it worse was that when the Mariners DFA'd Ty France, and he goes to Cincinnati and starts ripping it up, that was 100% embarrassing. Because it proved that it wasn't Ty France.
It was Scott Service.
It was
and Jerry Dipoto. And before we get into like Logan Gilbert, sure. I would think that Dan Wilson could have. I'm not saying that Dan Wilson would have made him into Cincinnati Reds Ty France, but at least it would have been a Ty France that we could deal with.
Correct. Where you can envision something. You could envision something in 2024 where you're not worried about launch angles and
yeah, for sure. Well, that was all we have about the Jorge Polanco situation, but we're going to get into Logan Gilbert, which I just woke up to the news this morning. I just had to talk about it, but we will after a word from our sponsor, SoFi Bank.
SoFi is an online bank and a personal financing company offering financial diverse products. They hold the naming rights to the home of the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Chargers, named SoFi Stadium. They offer amazing checking and savings accounts where you can get up to 4.6% on savings accounts. There are no monthly fees to maintain the accounts, and they have over 55,000 no-fee ATMs around the United States. You even have access to a budgeting program, stock trading, and insurance programs. Join SoFi and get $25 for joining and/or $25 for opening a stock trading account. Links are available in the description. And thank you. And lastly, I am not a financial advisor, so either find a professional financial advisor or go with your own gut.
So we woke up to some news this morning, and it really did get my attention, but it was about Logan Gilbert and his extension talks. And actually, it turns out that he has yet to have extension talks with the Mariners. Is this a big surprise? Not really.
No.
And according to Adam Judes of Seattle Times, he reported that there has been very little discussion about a long-term deal between the two sides. Nothing is imminent in that regard. Now, this doesn't come to as a surprise at all. And the other thing that really does stand out is that Logan Gilbert he's entering into his arbitration years where he is projected to make $8.1 million compared to his 4.005. So it makes me, not that I'm surprised, but it makes me nervous of like what the Mariners are actually going to do to approach this season. Like Stanton already pretty much said that he's basically just going to cover the arbitration costs, but there is no clear word if he's going to actually spend any kind of money or even give any kind of extension to our in-house players. So any thoughts on the news that we woke up to? Honestly, I think it was just Mariners saying, hey, we're still here to talk about, but it was like, but we already know this kind of thing.
Yeah, there's no incentive. What incentives does George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, or Cal Raleigh have to extend right now? What incentive do they have to sign long-term with Seattle when they've excuse me, when they've routinely year in and year out outside of 2022 routinely have completely fallen apart year in and year out. 2 years ago, it was in September. This year, it was in June. You know what I mean? And these guys go out there every 5 days and try to do their best. But because there's a complete lack of offense, there's no run support. And these guys every single 5 days have to go out there and essentially hold the score to zero, pitch perfectly. You know what I mean? And toe that fine line every single start. You know, these guys want to win, period. Now, maybe it's personal because obviously if Logan Gilbert is the catalyst that helps the Seattle Mariners win a World Series, obviously his market value skyrockets 100%. But that being said, these guys want to win. These guys are competitors. And there's zero incentive to re-sign long-term right now, especially with a dude like Jerry Dipoto in charge. Dude, these guys have had, like, every single offseason they've had a very close look at the inner workings of that front office. And every single offseason, they're like, man, we just want some big names in here to help us win. And every single year it's like, they come back with AJ Pollock or, you know what I mean? It's like
Cooper Hummel,
Tommy
LaStella,
and guys, and Jorge Polanco, who is a broken down version of himself. It's like there's zero incentive for them to re-sign long term right now. I talked to somebody who is very closely connected, who said they don't trust this front office to get it right. Now they're still members of the Seattle Mariners, and they're going to go out there and do their job to the best of the ability, because at the very least, even if they don't trade them and then they keep them until their walk year, they're going to go out there every 5 days. Logan's going to go out there every 5th day and do his job, and he's going to represent the city to the best of his ability, and he's going to do what he can to help this franchise win. 100%. Like there is no doubt about that. But as far as some of these players, they do not trust this front office. And it's not, they're not going out there to try to get managers fired. They're going to, they show up every single day to do their job. That's not the issue here. The issue is why would Logan at this point tie himself long-term to a franchise that routinely disappoints? Because it is disrespectful. Every single offseason, these guys witnessed this team progressively getting worse. From the highs of what they were able to accomplish in 2022, the failure to capitalize on that momentum. Like, we remember the offseason leading into 2022 when they got Robbie Ray, right? That was a huge signing. They got Robbie Ray, traded for Suarez, traded for Winker, traded for Frazier, guys that were coming off of all-star seasons, right? So there was a lot of momentum, and the feeling within the clubhouse and the feeling within the city was like the Mariners are going for it, right? Like everybody was moving in one direction. They're like, oh, we're going to the playoffs. Right now, maybe it was from the front office. We're trying to capitalize and trying to break the drought, and that's all they were trying to do. All right, well, mission accomplished. You broke the drought. Then what's next? What's next is taking what you did in the playoffs and then doubling down on that, and then getting farther. And then they progressively have gotten worse year in and year out. So from a player standpoint, they're like, no. I'm not going to re-sign long-term unless you're willing to overpay. Unless you're really willing to overpay, which is like, for a guy like Logan Gilbert on the open market right now, he's going to probably be making somewhere in the $18 to $24 million range, right? If you have multiple teams, trying to get his services, like that's what's going to end up happening on the open market. But the Mariners are like, yeah, we're willing to give you 12 a year for 5. And it's like, why would Logan take a discounted deal? He's like, no, it's cool. I'll take my arbitration and we'll get to the point where I'm going to be a free agent. Now, maybe things change. Because I still firmly believe that Jerry Dipoto is on the hot seat. And if he doesn't have a big offseason where he makes a statement, like going into the 2022 season where he made, he swung some trades and, he signed a big marquee free agent. And that statement was, we're going all in. If he had, I firmly believe that is going to be the plan this offseason, because if he doesn't, and he has the type of offseasons that we've seen for the last 2 years, he's going to get fired. And Jerry Dipoto does not want to get fired, right? There's a lack of trust in Jerry Dipoto. So he has no choice but to double down and try to get this team into the playoffs again. So it's going to be on a year-to-year basis, right? So if Jerry Dipoto goes out and brings in 2 marquee bats at third base and first base, you know what I mean? And maybe brings in, a competent right fielder to play with, Randy Arozarena and Julio Rodriguez in the outfield. And now all of a sudden your bench gets deeper because now you don't have to play Josh Rojas and Dylan Moore every single day. You know what I mean? Like you strengthen it by addition. and the Mariners get to the playoffs, then you can go back to Logan and say, see, we got to the playoffs, man. You got to pitch in the postseason. You got to be on the biggest stages in the postseason. Do you want to re-sign long-term? Right? Maybe then Logan comes and says, yeah, okay, that's cool. I'll take your 15 plus million for the next 4 years or 5 years or whatever the case may be. But right now, there is no faith in Jerry Dipoto. They don't want to tie themselves to this franchise right now because they're in a it's the whole "what have you done for me lately" philosophy, right? It's like quintessential Mariners. They're still showing the home run from Cal Raleigh 3 years ago. The home run that sent them to the playoffs. It's like they don't give it. Like players don't give a shit about nostalgia. They just want to win. They see their friends on the Dodgers and the Mets competing in the postseason. They just saw the Detroit Tigers participate in the postseason. A Tigers team that was not predicted to be there. And because home dude in Detroit pushed all the right buttons, they get to the postseason. The Mariners, with a great rotation, couldn't get to the postseason. For whatever the myriad reasons that we talked about, there is just no faith right now. And so if you're Logan Gilbert, what incentive do you have to take Seattle's money when you know for a fact in 2 years, top teams around this league are going to be knocking at your door, like with 25 million plus, 25 million a year offers for you to come to their team. And you're going to have a better opportunity to be in the postseason than you would in Seattle. What incentive right now does he have?
There's not much. And
exactly right.
We've already saw the warnings from those core players of Cal Raleigh and George Kirby, where Cal Raleigh said the ownership's got to spend the money. He said that last year before 2023 even ended. George Kirby, he liked the tweet from a Mariners fan about cheap ownership. Those should have been signals of like, hey, you should probably be spending a little bit of money to make your core players happy. Yeah. Now, if they left because after the Mariners won a World Series, then sure, fine, whatever. But the fact is, Mariners are in danger of losing this entire core, with the exception of Julio Rodriguez, without a World Series. Like, it's the same thing. Back in the 90s, it was the Mariners offense, record-setting offense. Didn't really have a World Series to show for. Actually, they didn't, shall I say.
Yeah.
Now it's the pitching, the best pitching core that the Mariners have seen in history. Yeah. Now we're in danger of seeing them without even a World Series appearance either. Like 2024, I felt like, do you remember 1996? You gotta love these guys. I feel like the Mariners could literally make the same exact thing of 2024. You gotta love these pitchers. It's like it was basically the same season with basically trading the bat for the pitching. It was basically the same season. They had a record-setting starting rotation, no playoffs. Back in 96, record-setting offense, no playoffs. And of course, our concern is Mariners may be striking deja vu, and it already does feel like it. So unless ownership can step up, unless they can get someone else other than Jerry Dipoto, because I don't even want him to have a do-or-die kind of season. I think it's pointless. I think it's a waste of time. Like, if they let go of Scott Service, Jerry Dipoto should have been next.
Yeah, the last thing you want is a lame duck GM with his fingers all over this roster, because he's had multiple bites at the apple since 2016, and he's only produced one playoff. Like, how many times do you have to tell a dude that he's completely failed? How many years are you gonna give this dude to prove otherwise that he is he's been here a decade, and has only one playoff appearance to show for it? I'll say this. I'm going to push back a little bit, because the difference between 96 and 2024 is that lineup had 4 first ballot Hall of Famers in it: Junior, A-Rod, Edgar, and then of course it had Randy Johnson, right? We don't have slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famers on this team. Not yet anyway, right? Like, some people will say, well, maybe Julio. Well, yeah, maybe, but maybe not, right? It's like Julio hasn't had a complete season yet. You know what I mean? But as good as this rotation is, and it's good, The failure to at least get them consistent offense where there's going to be some run support has been to a detriment. The one thing that I'm fearful is that because this last offseason they tried to sign Logan long-term and Logan said, I'm good. And they're going to try again this offseason to get him re-signed at least long-term because they feel like Logan is more likely to re-sign long-term than a guy like George Kirby or Cal Raleigh, who, obviously his agent doesn't negotiate pre-arbitration deals for his clients. He takes them to free agency. What happens if Logan says, no, I'm good? Again, what if he says no twice, right? My fear is that Jerry Dipoto is going to trade him. Right?
And that's the fear that we had. That's the fear we had going into this offseason.
Instead of keeping him for another another year and going into his final season where you can conceivably trade him at that point when his value is sky high, like they're going to trade him a year earlier. That to me is my fear, that Jerry Dipoto is going to act out of spite because Logan said no, and he's going to end up trading him for he's probably going to do the whole Paul Sewald thing again and trade him for quad A guys who have tremendous amount of upside, club control, the whole spiel. Jerry Dipoto is a big club control guy, right? So, that's my fear, is that, maybe he'll try to pair him with, Mitch Haniger to clear some cap space or whatever, clear some, roster space financially, and then, move them for top prospects. You know what I mean? That's my biggest fear. That's my biggest fear of all. Instead of trying to double down and get this core into the playoffs again, you're going to start seeing, Jerry Dipoto start removing pieces of this core. And this team is going to get farther and farther away. All it took was spending money. That's it. That's all it took, right? If you don't want to trade prospects, I understand, but that means you're going to have to spend money. And there were, the last two free agent classes were filled with guys who were good enough to help this team get into the playoffs. Last year, it was Matt Chapman and
Blake Snell.
Blake Snell and the
JD Davis.
That too. The guy from Chicago, the left-handed bat.
Luis Roberts.
No, the former Dodger. Cody Bellinger.
Oh, to Cubs. They had their chances. They had their chances to get all those guys.
And that's the thing. It's like as free agency was leaking into spring training, where you're going to be able to get value on some of those guys because nobody was going to give them the 5 years that they were looking for. Look at what Blake Snell ended up signing with San Francisco. Look at what Matt Chapman ended up signing with San Francisco, or JD Davis when they released him, when the Giants released him. There was opportunities to solidify certain positions, and they just did not want to pay. And that's to the detriment, because all these guys on the roster is watching you, right? They're watching you to see if you're actually going to sack up and bring in guys to help this team win. And here's the thing, man. I'll give them credit because they had a very good trading deadline. But that being said, that's only 50% of the puzzle. You had an entire offseason, and when you trade like one of the biggest clubhouse pieces to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and you basically got a half tin of chew and a bag of balls from, that doesn't sit well with your roster. And then when Eugenio Suarez, finally gets into the season, he has a monster second half. It does not look good when you do that, right? And then also the Teoscar Hernandez, I know you think it was a fumble, right? Not even offering him a qualifying offer. And then he goes to LA and just rips it up. You know what I mean? So it's like, these are the things that your players are watching. Like, I think you and I agree. had they brought back the 2023 roster and then just tweaked it and kept Jared Kelnick and kept Teoscar Hernandez and kept Eugenio Suarez, and then maybe you just tweak it by trading for Randy Arozarena and adding that to the lineup. You know what I mean? Or bringing in the 40-year-old Justin Turner to play DH. You know what I mean? Bringing in good clubhouse guys. Maybe things turned out different, but we saw that dude. He literally just gutted the roster, and your replacement at third base is Josh Rojas and a broken down third baseman who ended up playing the majority of the year in Tacoma. Like, that was your response. You traded a cornerstone piece for absolutely nothing, and then replaced it with a platoon split that didn't work out. And then and then your third base was manned by a dude who cannot play every day. Like, that does not sit well with your clubhouse. And it's like, if I'm Logan Gilbert, I'm like, no. Why? Like, there's going to be at least 5 teams that are going to be offering me at least $20 million a year because I'm a premium starter that never gets hurt. Why would I stay in Seattle?